And now, Editors Everything presents Sideways Stories from Wayside School. John was one of the smartest boys in Miss Jewel's class, but he had one problem. He could only read words written upside down. Nobody ever wrote anything upside down. But it was only a little problem. He just turned his book upside down. It was easy for John to turn his book upside down and to learn to read correctly. But the easiest way isn't always the best way. Miss Jewel said, "John, you can't go on reading like this. You can't spend the rest of your life turning your book upside down." "Why not?" asked John. "Because I said so," said Miss Jules. "Besides, that happens when I write something on the blackboard. You can't turning the blackboard upside down." "No, I guess you're right," said John. "I know I'm right, Miss Jules. You are going to have to learn to stand on your head." Okay. Chapter 1. Miss Gorf. Miss Gorf had a long tongue and pointy ears. She is the meanest teacher in Wayside School. She taught the class on the 30th story. If your children are bad, she warned, or if you would answer a problem wrong, I will wiggle my ears, stick out my tongue, and turn you into apples. Miss Gorf didn't like children, but she loved apples. Joe couldn't add, he couldn't even count. But he knew that if he answered a problem wrong, he would be turned into an apple. So he copied from John. He didn't like to cheat, but Miss Gorf had never taught him how to add. One day, Miss Gorf caught Joe and copying John's paper. She wiggled her ears, first her right one, then her left, stuck out her tongue and turned Joe into an apple. Then she turned John into an apple for letting Joe cheat. Hey, that isn't fair," said John. What John was "Hey, that isn't fair," said Todd. John was only trying to help a friend. Miss Gorf wiggled her ears, first her right one, then her left, stuck out her tongue, and turned Todd into an apple. "Does anybody else have an opinion?" she asked. Nobody said a word. Miss Gorf laughed and placed the 3 apples on her desk. Stephen started to cry. He couldn't help it. He was scared. I do not allow crying in my classroom, said Miss Go. She will hear his first her right, then her left, stuck out her tongue and turned Stephen into an apple. For the rest of the day, the children were absolutely quiet. And when they went home, they were too scared to even talk to their parents. But Joe, John, Todd, and Stephen couldn't go home. Score just left her on her desk. They were able to talk to each other, but didn't have much to say. They didn't know. Their parents were worried. They didn't know where their children were. Nobody seemed to know. The next day, Kathy was late for school. As soon as she walked in, Miss Score turned into an apple. Paul sneezed during her classroom. He was turned into an apple. Nancy said, "God bless you," when Paul sneezed. Miss Score wiggled hers first her right and then her left, stuck out her tongue and turned Nancy into an apple. Terrence fell out of his chair. He was turned into an apple. Marisha, she was halfway to the door when Miss Score's right ear began to wiggle. When she reached the door, Miss Score's letter wiggled. Marisha opened the door and went inside when Miss Score. Miss left ear wiggled. Marisha. And then Miss Score started her turn. Marisha gave an apple. Miss Score picked up the apple from the floor and put it on her desk with the others. Then was a funny thing that happened. Miss Score turned around and fell over a piece of chalk. The three Erics laughed. They were turned into one apples. Miss Score had a dozen. Miss Score had a dozen apples on her desk. Joe, John, Todd, Stephen, Keefe, Paul, Nancy, Terrence, Marisha, and the three Erics. Eric Fry, Eric Bacon, and Eric Evans. Louis, the yard teacher, walked into the classroom. He had missed the children in recess. He had heard that Miss Gorf was a mean teacher. So he came out to investigate. He saw the 12 apples on Miss Gorf's desk. I must be wrong. He thought she must be a good teacher if so many children to bring her apples. He walked back down to the playground. The next day, a dozen more children were turned into apples. Louis, the yard teacher, came back to the classroom. He had 24 apples on his Miss Gore's desk. There were only 3 children left in the class. She must be the best teacher ever, he thought. By the end of the week, all of the children were apples. Miss Gore must be very happy. "Now I can go home," she said. "I don't have to teach anymore. I won't have to wake up. I don't have to walk up 30 flights. It's upstairs ever again. You're not going," shouted Todd. "You're not going anywhere," shouted Todd. Miss Go. He jumped off the desk and bopped Miss Gorf on the nose. The rest of the apples was followed. Miss Gorf fell on the floor. The apples jumped. Stop! She shouted, or I'll turn you into an applesauce. But the apples didn't stop. And Miss Gore couldn't do nothing about it. Turn us back into children, Todd demanded. Miss Gore had no choice. She stared at Todd and wiggled her ears. This time, first her left one, then her right, and the apples turned back into children. All right, said Miss Marshall. Let's go. We get Louis. He'll know what to do. No! Screamed Miss Gore. I'll turn you back into apples. She wiggled her ears. Yes, and first her right, and then her left, and stick out her tongue. But Jenny Hulda held up a mirror, and Miss Gore turned herself into an apple. The children didn't know what to do. Even though Miss Gore was very mean, they didn't think it was right to leave her as an apple. But none of them knew how to wiggle their ears. Louise, the yard teacher, walked in. Where's Miss Gorf? He asked. Nobody said a word. Boy, am I hungry, said Louise. I don't think Miss Gorf will mind if I ate this apple. After all, she had always had so many. He picked up apple, which is really Miss Gorf, sharing it up on his shirt and ate it.